We are joined here in studio tonight by Juliet Kuenly and Sharice Johnson. Both are licensed professional counselors, and they're good enough to join us live here in studio. Ladies, thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. Juliet, let me start with you. Why is this topic important for us to talk about in a public way like this?
Well, it's a public health issue. It's a health-related issue, and it's the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. But it's preventable. So the more responsible conversations we can have like this, the more we can learn about warning signs, the more funding we can have for suicide prevention, things like that, the greater our chance for stopping suicide.
So when it comes to suicidal thoughts or even attempts, are there always warning signs ahead of time?
Unfortunately not, and that's part of what makes it so difficult. I believe that we're conditioned to believe that we can see when someone is struggling with mental health or it looks a certain way, but the reality of it is we all kind of live a highlight reel, and we present with one thing on the outside, but there may be a different story underneath.
And I think that's what scares people, especially in this most recent case, right? Because, Cheslie was talking about it publicly, her struggle, she was getting help, and yet, the worst thing happened here. So how can we start this conversation with a loved one when we know they need to get some help?
One of the biggest myths about suicide is that bringing it up to someone is going to put the idea in their head. So it's important to know that the research says it's not true. Bringing it up to someone could be the lifeline. So we have to learn how to get more comfortable having real, authentic dialogue around mental health, being really direct, having these explicit conversations, and knowing that sometimes a person's going to put up a boundary, but you can keep, reaching out to let them know you care and let them know there are options.
What's the first thing you should even bring up in a conversation like that if you're concerned about someone?
First thing is, tell me how you're doing really. A lot of times you ask someone, how are you? And they'll say, oh, I'm good. And I usually go, really? And then they're struck by that, and you're going to get another layer. And especially those that we would consider our strong friends or people that seem like they always have it together. I will sometimes ask, if I looked beyond what I see on the surface, what would I find?
Is it hard to convince people to seek therapy, to go into talk therapy and those kinds of things?
Yes, I mean, I think because of the stigma that remains, right? There's still so many layers of stigma. I think we're breaking through that, but conversations like this help. Conversations like this in response to what happened allow us to explore those gaps. They allow us to explore, inequities certain communities face, and they allow us to get to these deeper layers and learn from each other.
Sharice, let me ask you about the stigma attached to that. We've done stories here on the past on our newscast talking about the Black community, and there's a different stigma there. Do you still sense that? What is that stigma, and then how do we get past it?
Absolutely. If you think about just even historically, not showing what we feel has been protective. So there's also the aspect of that's a learned generational habit. Not being trusting of people that might not look like us or understand what we've been through, or even the fear of, if I bring all of that up and bring it to the table, will I still be able to function in the rest of my life? So it's very real, very present, still very much alive and functioning.
One thing we see too, right, is the church is obviously a major part, all of our communities really, but in the Black community as well. And you can, I hate to say, but pray it away is sort of a thing that people will sometimes say. Obviously, prayer can be helpful, but is it the only way?
It is not the only way. I'm a full proponent, and that's how I came into therapy, is that I spent maybe 8 to 10 years licensed in full-time ministry and saw the barrier to people feeling shame, because in their mind it was, if I love the Lord and I'm a good believer, then I shouldn't need anything else, so they withhold that help from them. So there's always multiple ways.
If you get them into therapy and maybe that is continuing, how does the conversation then go at home with your loved one? Like, what are the things that you should be talking about with them once they're starting to get that help?
I think you've got to know, again, what's that deeper level. So not the how are you really is wonderful, and kind of adding to that. So what's the worst thing about what you're going through? But again, you're gonna sometimes meet resistance, because people that are really used to presenting in a certain way, and that I do it all, have it all together, I'm really strong, and they maintain that pressure, they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know. So I also want caregivers and support people to know that you can't carry that responsibility and that pressure too. So it's kind of a balance of how much to reach out, but also know that it's not your responsibility.
Yeah, because that is important too, right? Because you're trying to help with these issues, but if it's stressing you out, making you worried, you hear news like what's happened today, it's going to make you even more worried about that loved one in your life. How do you find the balance in your own life so that you can be supportive?
Yeah. The other aspect to keep in mind is you may want to create non-verbal ways that you can communicate with each other, whether that's you have a notebook that you pass back and forth and go, you write what's going on if you're not able to sit down and give me eye contact, and then tell me respond or don't respond, or even a word or a phrase or a color that you can share with a loved one so that they know you're in the place of emergency, but you're not maybe ready to talk to me about it.
Can you, I used to use the word pester, maybe it isn't the right word, but can you pester too much about this, or do you have to continue to keep asking?
It's a great question. I think it's unique for different families. But yes, there is such thing as pushing too much and shutting someone down. And I think
how do you avoid that,
as
I guess?
long as there's the opening and they know that that you care and that there are resources. So I think, especially if it's a parent.
Yeah.
Making sure you've told your kids, here are some other trusted adults you can go to. Here are other resources. Here's the crisis hotline, so that they have some other outs.
Yeah. And I would say temperament matters with that a lot too. Sometimes a softer temperament would be crushed by the pressure. A tougher temperament will need the directness for you to kind of knock the wall down. So it really means knowing that person and how they respond best.
And just real quick, for those who may be watching the news who are hurting, what would you say to them tonight? Because this is tough to hear this news today.
It is. I just, that you're not alone. You're not alone, and that there is support. No matter how you've been impacted or are impacted, there is support. And the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is a great resource.
Great information. I appreciate you both coming in and talking about it. I know we just scratched the surface, but these chairs are always open to you guys to come on in and talk more about it. We talk about frontline heroes in our community through this pandemic. You guys are on that battle every day too, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for opening the space.
Absolutely. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, there is help out there. As mentioned, somebody who wants to listen. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7. Call the number there on your screen. You will get confidential support from a trained crisis worker. They will listen, they'll understand, they'll provide support, and they will get you the help you need. Write that number down and save it.